Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second conversation in our Building Black, Brown, and Immigrant Power series. My name is Bethel Sagai, and I'm a senior project manager with the Black Freedom Collective at Community Change. And my co-host today is my colleague and brother, Romel Sandino, who's a senior organizer with the Fair Immigration Reform Movement at Community Change. Welcome, Romel. So we are so thrilled to be joined by two amazing leaders today who have been working at the forefront of building Black, Brown, and immigrant power. Before I bring them into the conversation, I want to take a moment and acknowledge this moment that we are in, right? So this is a difficult time in our nation and across the globe. Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities continue to bear the brunt of this pandemic with the highest infection, death, and unemployment rates. The murder and killings of Black people have reignited the fight for racial justice. And just this week, we saw how much our system continues to fail us and how it is designed to protect the very people that are supposed to protect us. Even in a case as clear and cut and dry as that of our sister Breonna Taylor, who was shot in her very own home, justice is not served. The complete disregard for Black lives, and especially Black women, is all too real. It was painful for millions of Americans to watch that judgment Wednesday afternoon. And our thoughts and prayers are with the family of Taylor, and we stand with all of you who are feeling the rage and sadness of this compounding moment. With less than 38 days from the elections, let's take this energy to the polls and do all we can to change the fate of this country. Now more than ever, Black, Brown, and Indigenous people must work together, not only to fight for justice, but to fight to create a new America where we are free and where we can thrive. Now, we're organizers, right? So we always have an ask. And so today we're asking you all to do a couple of things to get involved. The first is for one of our partners and guests who are coming on to this conversation today, Spaces in Action, based in Washington, D.C., and Long Live Go-Go. They'll be holding a at-large candidates forum on Saturday, October 3rd. For those of you who are in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, please make sure that you check out Spaces in Action. There should be a link that's popping up now, and make sure to sign up so you can be part of this great candidates forum and be part of asking questions to these candidates who will be determining the fate of Washington, D.C. Another ask that we have is that you join our weekly texting party. So every Wednesday, we're hosting texting parties from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where volunteers come together from across the nation for voter engagement, which is so important right now. And we're reaching out to thousands of people to make sure that they are registered to vote and engaging with them on issues that matter most. So take a moment to join the link and sign up for a texting party. And lastly, but not least, we also have a Black Lives petition that is going on. And so we're inviting you all to take a moment and sign our petition for Black Lives as a declaration of your commitment to the fight for racial justice. So you can also be part of our community and stay up to date on events like these conversations that we're having. So with that, I'd like to introduce our two incredible leaders and bring them into this space. So first we have LaDawn Love, who's the Executive Director of Spaces in Action, based in Washington, D.C., who is a seasoned and longtime organizer. And just so you know, Spaces in Action is a membership organization. So you can sign up to be a member and be part of their organizing efforts in Washington, D.C. Welcome, LaDawn. Next, I'd like to invite Gustavo Torres to join the conversation. And Gustavo is the president of Casa in Action, which is the largest Latinx immigrant rights organization in the Mid-Atlantic region. Welcome, Gustavo. So I just want to take a moment before I hand it over to Romel to kick off the conversation, just to frame these conversations that we're having. So again, this is the second conversation that we're having in our Building Black, Brown, and Immigrant Power series. So last week, we talked about why it's important to build solidarity and unity as Black and Brown people. LaDawn and Gustavo, you talked about the importance of connecting with each other, right? Through storytelling, actions, relationship building, and how these leads to building trust, going across cultures to understand each other and create empathy. but also using stories to talk about the role of race, class, gender, and other identifiers and forms of oppression that play out in our lives, right? And understanding the role that they have in the outcome and the fate of our lives. We know, and Gustavo, you spoke to this, that patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism are the root cause of many of, if not all of the problems that our communities are facing, right? And we know that these conversations are not easy to have, but they're necessary. And this is also part of the healing process that you talked about, LaDawn, that we need to do as Black and Brown and Indigenous people in this country, right? Who are continuously being harmed. And it's also important for us to hold each other through these moments. And as organizers, we're moving fast all the time, but it's important to take a pause and take care of ourselves so that we can be stronger for the fight ahead. You both also talked about the importance of educating ourselves and our history, the history of Black people in this country, and how this has paved the way for so much of our organizing in this country today. We know that historically, Black, Brown, and Indigenous people have also worked together side by side in the struggle for their rights, justice, and freedom, such as the National Farm Workers, or in the 50s and 60s, when Martin Luther King was supporting Cesar Chavez during the Civil Rights era. These are just some examples of how our communities are working together. And LaDawn and Gustavo, you both shared how you are showing up for each other. As a mostly Latinx organization and Black-led organization, you've been out there at protests just this week, rallying your base around immigrant rights issues, racial justice issues, around COVID relief, and it's been beautiful to see and be a part of. And today we want to dive a little bit deeper with both of you to get a sense of what it actually looks like to put in the work of building Black, Brown, and immigrant power. And so with that, I want to pass it over to my colleague Romel, who's going to help us kick us off.
Thank you, Bethel. Gustavo, LaDawn, welcome once again. We're very honored to have you as part of this very important conversation, and to all of our viewers that are joining us from across the country. Welcome, and please share your questions by dropping them in the chat box as this conversation is ongoing. We really want to hear from each and every one of you. So Gustavo and LaDawn, let's kick off this conversation with the first question, where we want to go deeper on the things that were discussed last week, especially around what are the spaces that we are creating and the bridges that we are building to bridge the barriers across the different cultures and the different groups that we're working with. And so we can start with you, Gustavo.
One more time, and I believe that it's very important that we speak about, as I mentioned before, not solidarity between the two groups, but how we can be part of the movement between each other, how we can fight together these extraordinary attacks against Latinos and immigrants, but in particular against the Black community. I just want to emphasize that today, as we speak, our brothers and sisters are being killed. And I think that is our responsibility to respond to that together as a team, as a group, as a family, as a Black, as a Latinos, as a Indigenous, as a white people who care about this issue. You need to respond, because Black people have been killed in this country for many, many years and today. So I think that is very important. Now, the way how we do this is when we come together and we support each other with specific and concrete issues that impact our families and impact our communities. Again, criminal justice is a so very, very important issue for both communities. The for-profit companies are making millions and millions and millions of dollars to have the Black community right over there in jail and to have the immigrant community detained. So I think that is an opportunity for us to work together, to say, basta, enough is enough. We really need to work in this issue together. So that is one example of the importance of working together. The another very, very critical piece, and as I put an example before, is about education. Education, as you know, is a top priority for the Latino and immigrant community, and is a #1 priority, if I can call, for the Black community as well. Why? Because we know that education liberates us. Because we know that a good education, by the way, not a traditional education, a good education are going to liberate both communities. Because we have, in many occasions, no opportunities in our families to go to college. And now, more than ever, is an opportunity to work together to have the best public education possible. So that is kind of one issue that I believe also that is so very, very important. And I just put the example again in particular in Maryland, when we passed the DREAM Act, an extraordinary victory 10 years ago. And Romel, I remember that you were part of that extraordinary victory. And again, we got this victory thanks to the Black community, thanks to the African-American community. Not only the Black caucus come together and pass the legislation, but also after the anti-immigrant, anti-Black people come together and collect signature to put that legislation into a referendum. We won the referendum thanks to the Black community. 80% of the Black community strongly support us because they understand and we understand, and together we understand that education is so essential and so critical for our families and for our communities. And of course, immigration is so essential. That is the reason why you see, the Black caucus in Congress 100% supporting comprehensive immigration reform. That is the reason why you see our brothers and sisters in the street with us fighting for immigration reform. When those people separate our families and detain our families and abuse our mothers and abuse our sisters, I know for a fact that for the African-American community, for the Black community, is exactly feeling the same ways because they have been abused and attacked by the system in the same ways. So anyway, that is kind of the way that I believe that we can work together and keep building power together.
Thank you, Gustavo. And I'm going to invite LaDon before there's a lot to react to, right? But I'm going to invite LaDon to join us in this conversation. And just quickly, the question is, what is the work, LaDon, that you're doing to bridge barriers across differences among cultures, among groups?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, leading back into the storytelling again, because when we listen to each other's stories, I was thinking of something that I heard Dr. King say in a speech, that one of the things that the oppressor does is thingify us. When you thingify something, you separate that thing from a human contact. You separate that thing from a value. And we want to make sure that we humanize people. And one way to do that is through our sharing of stories with each other, understanding each other's experience, not just about the work, but who is the person. So understanding, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? What is your family life like? What types of things did your elders do when you did something wrong? And how were you punished and redirected? How did your family take care of ailments that you've had? I remember talking with a Latina elder, and I was talking to her about having a sore throat, and she said, put salt water and a little bit of vinegar in the water. Make sure it's warm and gargle 3 times a day. And once I started doing that, I never got strep throat again. I might have gotten a sore throat, but it healed itself quickly. And as I told some elders in my family, they were like, oh yeah, that's the same thing we did in the South. So there's so much commonality, but we don't always know if we don't share the stories and talk to each other. So the first thing that we work to do is humanize people so that we can understand who we are, what makes us who we are, and what kind of dreams and visions do we have for ourselves and our family, where we also find commonality, because then we start talking about what does that mean for our community. Then that creates space for all of those things that Gustavo's talking about, because some of that work happened in there that made people stand together and say, I want to make sure you're okay, because I understand that my well-being is connected to your well-being. And so that's going to be something that it's really important that we do between Black and Brown and Indigenous communities. And then we spread that out to other communities as well.
Can I mention, in addition,
Go ahead,
totally in agreement with you, 100% is so very, very important. I just want to mention, again, back to 10 years ago when Spaces, CCC and CASA come together and say, we need to create a curriculum to make sure that we know the history of each other, to make sure that the Latino and immigrant community understand very well about the civil rights and the history of slave and why the African American is still, as of today, have been abused and humiliated. What is the explanation? What is the racism behind that? And I think that was so very powerful. Also, when we include, and you remember that one, when we include also, you know what? Our brothers and sisters probably don't know why we are right to this country right now. So I think that it's important as well that the Black community understand why we are arriving today. What is the issues of the civil rights, the economy, the violence in our countries, to understand each other and to understand where we're coming from with this history that you just described. So I think that is so very important. And that is the way how we are going to build more one movement, right? That to in solidarity. I insist about this. We need to create just one movement for our communities. And I'm very sure that we are moving in that direction.
Thank you, Gustavo and Ladan. And just quickly to react that with what you're sharing, it also reminds us that through the story sharing of getting to know our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, right? And through the education that Gustavo mentioned as well, we're also in a process of unlearning and dismantling, right? The same systems of the ideas of the system of oppressions that are chaining us down as well. And I know that last week in our conversation, we spoke about, Gustavo, you brought it up, right? The need among our Latina movements to fight against and dismantle anti-Blackness, right? And through the education, like you mentioned, Gustavo, through the curriculum, right? We come together in a circle, and we come together in agreement that the only way that we can move forward is together and united. And I think that, thank you for bringing those important points up. And I'm going to pass it to Bethel that will share with us the second question.
Yeah, thanks, Ramel. And thank you both so much for just enlightening us with, sort of your own personal experiences and your experiences in the movement with building Black, Brown, and immigrant power. Yeah, I mean, I think you've already kind of spoken, Gustavo, you've started to give some examples, of what it looked like when you come together in this movement. And I'm wondering if you could give us actually a couple more examples about, like, what does it look like when you're out in the streets together? I mean, you all actually recently had an action together, I think on Wednesday, or maybe Thursday, correct me if I'm wrong, around the the COVID relief bill and the fact that Congress has still not passed anything. I mean, what does it look like when you're out on the streets? What does it look like when we're actually winning together? Ladan, how about you go first?
Okay. So Wednesday, I got a call about a planning to just put some pressure on the RNC because we need to make sure that Mitch McConnell and the GOP are focusing on the needs of the people before they worry about who the next Supreme Court justice will be. Yes, we need to have a replacement, but it's not a priority. The priority are the people. Right now, we have excluded workers and we have families that are trying to make ends meet, that are fearful about losing their homes, losing their apartments. And we have folks who are concerned about having access to COVID-19 testing, as well as what happens when someone finds out that they have found themselves to be infected. People fear the medical bill. There's no reason why in this country someone should fear having a medical bill. We should make sure that everyone is taken care of. And it's regardless of your status as a citizen. The fact is we need to take care of all people living in America, because if one person gets sick, you can get sick as well. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter your income. It doesn't matter your citizenship status. We are all one people. Again, it's about humanizing. And we were able to stand with CASA. NACASAC was there, a group called Shut Down DC, Spaces in Action. And we stood together. There was no separating us. We shared our resources. We had masks and banners and bandanas that we shared with each other. It wasn't like it's only for my group. It was really a family-oriented action. There were even small children there, and the children just won everyone's heart right away. Like because they're not just because they're beautiful children, but because this is what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the future of children, the children who live in America. So that was a really powerful experience. And this is not the first time nor the last time that we stood with CASA in action. We will continue to do that. We have a history of doing that, as Gustavo talked about, from the curriculum to us standing together to push back on oppressors who are trying to hold down the people of America, the people who live in America. So it was really powerful to stand there with CASA and NACASAC and Shut Down DC and all of the other organizations that were there. We did have some hecklers who came, and the way to disarm them, as you can see, folks just started dancing, and it just totally diffused the situation, and they didn't know what to do. So yet again, just standing together, a Black woman and an Asian man began doing a dance, and then they just vibed off each other. And look at how culture just brought it together. There was a drum. A drum goes across any of our cultures, right? There's a drum in Africa. There's a drum for Black people. There's a drum for Latino people. There's a drum for Asian people. This is something that is a common place that brings us together. And I'm going to keep on saying it, and gives us space to build up our humanity together as we fight against this oppressive state that we are currently experiencing.
I love that, LaDawn. And I really love this through line of humanizing everything, right? I think, especially in this moment that we're in with the COVID-19 pandemic, it really is something that impacts everyone. And in a country or in a society like America, where we're very individualistic, I think that the Black and Brown communities kind of show another way of being and living in community, because we are very community-oriented people. And even just with that example of being out in the street and using our music, our culture, our joy to fight back, because that is our strength, is just beautiful. Gustavo, I'd love to bring you into the conversation. And again, it would be great to hear a little bit more about not only the work you've done with Spaces in Action, but other Black-led organizations and other movement work that you've done to win on different levels. And you started speaking a little bit about, education, criminal justice. It would be great to hear a little bit about some of those stories from you.
So thank you again, Bethel. I really appreciate this question. I will say, totally in agreement with LaDawn, is beautiful, is powerful to see the communities coming together and to see this beautiful diversity that we have. And also, not only when you see our people, our communities in the streets, but in preparation to any event, to any rally, the time that we spend to make sure that Black faces, speakers, and decision makers are right over there is so very important for us. The Latinos also are right over there, like together, that they can speak and they feel that they are a family. So we spend a lot of time in this, because that is the way how we build a real movement. When we bring the two communities together, not only in the streets that are very important and are very essential, but in the preparation, in the decision-making process. So I just want to mention just a couple examples related with that. When we say that the education is very important, or criminal justice is very important, it's not because I say that. It's not because, LaDawn told me that is the priority. It's because we consult and we speak with the community about what is your priorities. Tell us what is your priorities to make sure that we empower and to make sure that you are going to fight for what is the issues that you really care about. So when we go and speak with people and they tell us education is a priority, exactly what I say, because for my family it's a way to liberate my community, right? So that is kind of an example, and I can put a lot of ways how we do that. We consult with our community, we go directly with them, we ask questions. We have a structure internally in our organization, in CASA in Action, with Black immigrants, African Americans also, and Latinos together in different committees, speaking about what is your priorities and how we are going to accomplish that. In Virginia, just one example. We won the elections last year. Priority number one, they told us, minimum wage, $15 per hour. And that was both communities that come together. And they say the minimum wage is so essential. And I say, explain to me why. And I recall the example that I mentioned before in Baltimore, where the Latino day laborers, they went to work for like $7, $6 per hour because they really need the monies to be able to pay the rent. And the African American day labor say, hold your horses. Let's go and negotiate this. Let me teach you how we can do it to see if we can increase the salaries of everybody. And it was a so beautiful process to see how the African American day laborers educate the Latino day laborers to fight for minimum wage. Now it's $15 per hour. Because that, we fought for $15 per hour in Virginia as well, and we passed the legislation. Because that, we believe that was so very important that we keep the communities together to send a very, very important message. Because these elections that are coming, as you described it, in 38 days, are going to be the most important elections of our life. And both communities, Latinos and African American, need to come together and vote and send a very strong message about education, criminal justice, immigration reform, about the economy, about very, very important, about racism, about why you are killing our families and our communities. So we have a very, very strong responsibility as a both communities. We are on the streets, we are fighting for specific policies, and now more than ever, we need to make sure that we go and vote in November 3rd.
Thank you, Gustavo. That's wonderful. Yeah, and I love that you're also emphasizing the importance of not only having people come out to rallies or protests or manifestations, but also working strategically together, right? Like, you know, in the boardrooms, like in the organization, you know, you're having conversations off the streets in preparation and really thinking strategically how your communities can show up in this moment and be united. And so I love that. And I also, what I'm also hearing is that looking at these issues, you know, whether it's criminal justice or education or minimum wage issues, right? Those are all issues that if we work together will help us liberate our communities and liberate ourselves, right? That path to liberation, it involves so many different things because we are in the system of oppression. And so I love that frame of thinking as well. So thank you both for sharing that. And I want to pass it over to Romel to ask our last question.
And I think this is just a natural way to pivot into the elections, right? This is the most quintessential election that we're living. Like, we all know what is at stake for our communities in these elections, right? We are living uncertain times. These elections means life or death for our communities, keeping our families united or keeping our families divided. But we're also feeling the urgency, not only to mobilize voters, right? Because like Gustavo said, we have to show up on the streets, we have to show up at home, but we also have to show up at the polls. But we're now feeling an urgency of protecting our votes, not only mobilizing our votes, but protecting our votes. And so I wanted to start with Gustavo again. If you could share with us, Gustavo, like, how are you in Casa in Action protecting the vote in face of violence and face of fear tactics that that's being used against against communities of color? And how are you making sure that our votes are protected?
Romel, thank you so much. This is a very, very important question. This is very, very essential. Before I answer to you that question, I want to emphasize again about the importance of the vote from the two communities. And one piece that is very critical is that in our two communities, both communities, actually, we are so similar, but women are so enthusiastic and ready to vote. When you saw the numbers, men, we have a male problem. I want to tell you, we do. We have a problem. We need to resolve it. Women are so very, very powerful. Like, you remember what happened in Alabama, right? a few years ago, 98% of women come and vote to remove a rapist who was running for senator. Today, the number of Black women and Latina women who are ready to vote and to remove this president is so way massively. It's unbelievable. And we are so excited about this. And we are organizing our communities to make sure that women speak out and go and vote. And they already know what they are going to do. The issue is us, we as Latinos and African Americans, we need to move quickly and to make sure that we match what women are telling us. That is the election of our generation, that we really need to go and vote. So I want to invite, I am calling everybody, male in particular, to go and vote, to learning from the women who are doing an extraordinary job. We got to do it. We don't have another option. Is our opportunity to make sure that we are going to vote and remove this president. So that is number one that I want to clarify. And we know why. Education, health, criminal justice, race, all of that kind of thing is so essential to make sure that we remove this president who hate our communities. But in addition to that, Romel, answer your question, we also need to protect. We also need to protect the elections, and we need to protect the vote. So what we are doing is that we are preparing. And we have attorneys who are preparing us, and we are going to be in the streets. We are going to mobilize our communities. We are going to partner. And I don't mention last time, we are going to be in Washington, D.C., in Black Lives Plaza with you together to send a very strong message that we are protecting the vote, and we are going to be rally if it's necessarily civil disobedience. Any legal tools that we have, we are going to utilize, because nobody is going to steal our votes. And we are going to win because we are in the middle in a democracy that is imperfect. And our responsibility as Latinos and immigrants and African American community is to perfect that democracy. That is our role, and we are going to work on that.
Thank you, Gustavo. I love how you just framed it. We have to perfect our democracy, right? We have to perfect it. And Ladan, I'm inviting you into this conversation.
Yes, I like that charge of perfecting the democracy. So we have several things that we're going to do. So on October 3rd, we're doing a candidates forum that will be at 14th and U Northwest, and we're doing that in partnership with Long Live Go-Go and a host of other organizations that includes Don't Mute My Health, DC Early Learning Collaborative, Shut Down DC, and Under 3 DC Coalition. So that's one piece we're doing, and we're going to be meeting with the at-large candidates, and we're currently collecting questions from the community and from our issue campaigns. Our focuses are health equity, early learning, and economic justice. In addition to that, to follow up and make sure we follow through, we are continuing to do voter registration at every event that we do, and we'll be doing calls. We're going to be engaging in community changes texting parties. We've been talking to our our leaders about being more engaged there. And then on November 3rd, so everybody's doing this work all across the country and definitely in our region. On November 3rd, we're going to meet, as Gustavo said, at Black Lives Matter Plaza. We're going to start meeting up at 4 p.m. and go through the evening. And it really is about us coming together after we vote and celebrating ourselves, because we know the fight will not be over that night. There's going to be many things that follow up with counting ballots, some issues around, hopefully there's not issues, but we know that there might be around votes and things of that nature. We're going to do our work in the community to get out the vote, and then we're going to come together and celebrate. So there's going to be music and dancing and poetry and some speak outs, and we're going to just make it a lot of fun. In DC, we don't do anything without music, and the music in DC is go-go music. So it'll definitely be some go-go music there, but we want to have some salsa music there. Like, it needs to be a real big celebration. We're talking with Free Vaccines about doing a flash mob dance. So like, it's going to be really, really big. And we're also talking to folks in other states, because we know that every single state has its work that's happening. We want those folks to pull together something in their state so we can make it our countdown, right? So at the end of the year, there's this dance party. We want to have our own November 3rd dance party and be able to bounce from state to state so folks can give an update on what they're doing in their state. So we're in conversation with Community Change about doing this, and we know that this is going to be really powerful. So for this event, Shut Down DC is one of the groups helping to spearhead it, along with Sunrise, Long Live Go-Go, Spaces in Action, CASA in Action, and there's going to be more and more groups that'll be a part of this process, because I know I didn't name everyone, and we're still in conversation to get more groups as well as individuals brought into taking ownership over the success of us having a party to celebrate what we've done, and also to prepare for where we still need to go on November 3rd. So if you're in DC, Black Lives Matter Plaza, 4 p.m. on November 3rd. Be there or you will miss out, but you could catch us online too.
Thank you, LaDon. Thank you, LaDon, for making that direct invitation to all of our viewers to meet us at Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C. for this great day of celebration. And also for inviting other states to do something, to anchor something in their state capitals or wherever they're at, right? Because November 3rd is going to be a People's Day of Action. We have to make sure that we're showing up at the polls. We have to make sure that our votes by vote by mails or absentee ballots are being counted. We have to make sure that, you know, we are perfecting our democracy, like Gustavo said. And I think that an important point, LaDon, that you also mentioned, that I want to bring up is that we have to inoculate our folks, right? That a decision might not come on election night. And that if it does not come on election night, our democracy is working, because more people, more than ever, people are voting through vote by mail, absentee ballots, because we're in the midst of a pandemic, right? And we might be expecting long lines on the day of the election for in-person voting as well. So we have to start inoculating our folks, and I know that many of our partner organizations are already having these conversations with our members, that a decision on election night might not come, and that we're already telling folks that might be just the normal from now on, but we have to show up. And I think that what you're already organizing, LaDon, and what Spaces in Action is organizing is just a powerful reminder that we have to be preparing and making plans to be out in the streets and to show up. So I wanted to ask if there's a question from one of the audience members that I want to ask Gustavo and LaDon, and it's around how did you start the conversation and who did you call to the table when? And I think I'm just gonna make a guess here. Speaking from a lens of building Black, Brown, and immigrant power, how did you start having these conversations? And how did you, let's go at this, like, how did you build a table, right? Or the circle, and how did you invite folks in?
I would say for us, we always start with our own membership, having conversations, and then our members are always responsible for identifying other folks to bring to the table. So I think without even thinking about it, we're doing relational organizing, because you're going to start with who you know, but then those folks know other people. Yesterday on a call that Oprah Winfrey did with NAACP, one of the women on the panel said that women have a network of at least 20 people and men have a network of 7. So with that in mind, you know, this is why when Gustavo talked about women leading, this is why we lead. So we welcome people to the table. We do one-to-ones with individuals to just get a better understanding of who they are, but we don't work to exclude anyone. People come to the table because they're interested in being a part of the fight. People stay at the table because they make connections with other people and see that what we're working on aligns with their own values. So, you know, I think get into contact with Spaces in Action, get in contact with CASA in Action, get in contact with Community Change if you're in another state and you want to find out about an organization that's close to you. So don't feel like you cannot be connected. Get connected. We need as many people in this work as possible. As far as the trainings, but all of our organizations have an emphasis on training because we want to build the capacity of individuals so that they can work together to win. So training and support is there for you. As far as the work between CASA and Spaces, you know, when we talked about the Crossing Borders curriculum, as soon as we got off as soon as we first talked about it, I had a conversation with Dusha, and I said, we need to figure out how do we make sure we bring this back to the forefront of our organizing work and our training work within Spaces in Action. So we are already beginning to plan for this year's Leadership Academy, as well as what we're going to do starting in February when we start our next year's Leadership Academy. So that's really powerful. The other thing I wanted to throw out there is there's a group in New York City called Community Voices Heard. They came up with this concept of doing a survey to interview women who identified as Black. So this was immigrant women, Latino women, Black women, African-American women, Indian women who identified as Black, whoever it was. If they identified as Black, they filled out this survey. And now they have these findings that they're utilizing to inform electoral campaigns in New York. I'm working with them because I said, I want to be able to do that in DC and in Maryland, where we do work, because this would be so powerful. So it's called Follow Black Women by Community Voices Heard. So there's a lot of different ways. So if you're in New York, plug in with, Community Voices Heard or one of those groups, but don't feel like you have to be out there by yourself. If you feel like you can't find a group locally, get in touch with Community Change and find out about groups that are in your area. But if you're in DC or Maryland, talk to Spaces in Action or CASA in Maryland. We're here to serve and to build with you.
That's right, LaDon. This is not a moment to shy away, right? There's not a moment to stay on the sidelines. This is a moment to get involved, right? Get connected, get involved, be part of an organization, get involved with the movement. And so, Gustavo, pitching it to you quickly.
Thank you very much.
The question.
I also see some questions from the audience that I want trying to wrap up and respond to. So number one is totally in agreement with LaDon. We need to start it in home. We need to evaluate the anti-Blackness first in home, and then how we can bring for there. And I just want to put one example of what we are doing right now in terms of how we need to keep bringing communities together. First of all, we are going to have what we call additional training of anti-Blackness in the Latino community. So very important. So that is the way how we can create a real movement. And secondly, speak about particular issues. And right now we are having this conversation about coronavirus. And we communicate and share with our families in both communities. The coronavirus is killing our families because coronavirus doesn't discriminate. The system discriminates. It's the system that discriminates our families and our communities. When we see poverty and lack of housing and lack of education and lack of healthcare, very clearly we have all of those issues. I guarantee you that this virus is not going to kill us. It's killing the Black community and the Latino community the way how it is. So it's very important. So we have this kind of conversation about and how we can build support and movement and solidarity between each other in this particular moment. An audience asked the question about what we are going to do if Trump decides not to concede that he is going to be defeated. But by the way, we are going to defeat him. I want to be very clear about that. We will, because the two communities and follow the direction of women, the Latina and African American women, we are going to win this. But in case that these guys say no, we are going to be in the streets, because we truly believe that the answers to the anti-democratic person and hate person who hate us is more democracy. We believe that is more democracy that is the solution, that is the vaccine to that situation. So we are going to be at the streets. We are going to work with our attorneys. We are going to work with our communities to make sure that we demand a very clear result to the victory that we are going to have in November 3rd.
Thank you, Gustavo. There's also a quick question, and LaDon, I want to ask it to you. A question from one of our audience member, Trish. Thank you for watching us. What has been a good entry point issue for you to build solidarity around? And where has it been really easy to come together?
Yeah. So one, I would say, because our communities are plagued by the same oppression, it just hits us differently because of citizenship or non-citizenship. All of the issues are entry points. It's really about listening and building together. And I would say that it really is about having patience and trying to listen for understanding and finding that commonality. But any of the issues are great entry points for bringing folks together. And then making sure that you're asking more questions for understanding as opposed to just assuming what somebody has experienced or what somebody's feeling. So that would be my answer.
Like a good organizer, listening and questioning, right? Listening and questioning and getting to the heart of the issue. Thank you, LaDon. So I'm going to turn it over to Bethel to start wrapping us up.
Thanks, Ramon. Thanks both. Yeah, you know, this conversation has been so fruitful, and I hope it's been fruitful for our audience as well. And we just want to thank both of you again for all the hard work that you are doing in this moment, and the hard work that you've been doing for decades. And LaDon, I just want to, emphasize again, I love this November 3rd event. I know I will be there. I know Romel will be there because we're in DC and we're so excited. And Gustavo, we know you will be there as well. But just to use this moment also to celebrate all the hard work, right, that everyone is doing, that everyone has been doing, but also to take a moment to just, live and sit in this moment of, we've done everything that we have. We've tried all our best, right? We've given it all we got. And as Gustavo said, we hope that the outcome of the elections will be in our favor. But no matter what, we will be out there on November 3rd together, right? Standing and celebrating in our strength, in our joy, and then facing whatever comes next, right? So please, if you are in the DC area, or even if you're in a surrounding area, come out. But if not, also like LaDon said, reach out to Spaces in Action and see how you can set up your own watch parties where you are. So again, thank you again, LaDon and Gustavo, for joining us today. For all of you watching out there, thank you for tuning in. This video will actually be available as soon as the conversation ends. So share this with your community, share this with your organizations, your family, and your friends. And just want to do a couple more plugs. So join our weekly texting parties every Wednesday. We should have a link that's coming up, and they are from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this is where you have an opportunity to get out and help people to turn out to vote for November 3rd, but also to engage with people around the issues that matter most to you. We also have our Black Lives Petition. So join our petition as a way to show your commitment and be part of our community so you can stay in touch with the future conversations that we'll be hosting. So please stay safe, everyone, and make sure you're registered to vote and get out on November 3rd.